I think we're live. Hey guys, I'm Ganesh. So today we are excited to have David from the Aave team join us as a guest. David, would love to hear about yourself. How do you introduce yourself and how you got into the space?
Yep, sure. Hey everyone, thanks for having me. So I'm David, engineer, software engineer, builder, developer, whatever else. I do a few things at Aave, from like full stack dev to a lot of developer relations, community type things as well. You usually see me helping out a lot of hackathons and creating code examples or working on the docs and things like that. So that's what I normally do. How I got into the space was I've been in crypto for a long time now, probably since 2017, going back and forth on various projects and companies, having some companies of my own as well. And then with Aave specifically, I joined in the start of 2020 actually. So just when V1 was released. And it was a pretty crazy time. And it's funny because Stani posted something on, Stani, the founder CEO, he posted something on Twitter saying, hey, it should be possible to do this, like using flash loans to swap collateral of a MakerDAO vault. And then I spent like a weekend or a few days just experimenting with that. Then I created it. And then I replied to his tweet and said, hey, like, I've done it. Then from that, that was how I got on his radar. Then met him in London, and then joined the team. And it's been a crazy ride since then. Just building. That project was called Collateral Swap back in the day, and it was, I think, one of the new use cases of flash loans, in that it wasn't for arbitrage. It was specifically to change positions. So now InstaDApp and DeFi Saver, they do that really well these days.
That's awesome. And so there's a lot to unpack here, but let's first start with your background. So I have a very boring beige background, and the lighting is off here because the sun is just about to rise. It's just 8 a.m. here. So some of the books that are on your background here, that's very interesting. Like, what are you reading these days? There is Capital. That's what I can see. There is what are some of those books there?
A lot of like finance, economic history stuff, about crowds, about manias. This one's about bubbles, bubbles forming, things like that. But of course, the standard Taleb stuff. I love Taleb and his writing. So it's about fat tails and things like that, asymmetric bets and things like that, and a lot of just like mental models and thinking. So those are sort of books that I read. But I read pretty far and wide. These days. How about you? What are you reading?
It's mostly team culture. I read a bit of spirituality. I'm big into fitness. I put on about 40 pounds last year, so trying to shed all of that excess fat, excess body fat. So just mostly along those lines. I think I'm doing less of technology these days, so technology per se is not a big focus for me. But I listen to a lot of podcasts. So everything on the data side, I listen to podcasts. I listen to a lot of crypto podcasts. One thing I like about podcasts is you can run them at 2x, which is amazing. Because you can really, really compress it. And I'm usually listening to 4 or 5 different podcasts at the same time. So this is not something that a lot of people do. So I pause it, take notes, synthesize it, digest it, but listen to something else and come back to it. And I recently procured an iPhone, so I'm going to jump on the Clubhouse bandwagon.
Nice.
So let's see how that goes.
It's really cool.
Are you on Clubhouse?
We are. We hold some like AMAs on Clubhouse every now and then, like as an Aave team, and I'm sort of listening in every now and then. But I find with like Clubhouse and even podcasts these days, there's just so many, so trying to find the quality is quite hard. And sometimes, like for me, it's good if you sit down for a podcast and like write notes and listen carefully. But I find that I'm usually listening to podcasts and doing something else. So the retention of knowledge isn't so great for me, at least, generally. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so let's walk through that timeline. You joined probably in the Jan Feb timeframe. Was this around ETH Denver? Was it before, after?
It was East London actually. So just after East London, because I met Sani in London.
Okay. So I remember that vividly. I did meet I think I met the team at ETH Denver, and then this whole COVID stuff was coming out, and I canceled my plans to London and Paris, and then I just went back home, which is Vancouver. And
crazy time, huh?
And then it got crazy after that. So I'm wondering, I think in March there was a correction, there was a pullback in the market. At any point where you was like, oh shit, maybe DeFi is not the place for me, or you were just, you've been building for so long that it didn't really matter, these ups and downs as part of the course?
I mean, because I've been around since 2017, so I've seen like, this is probably like my second or third bubble in crypto. So I sort of knew that, but for DeFi specifically, the sort of the tool or the little hacky project that I did, the Collateral Swap, that actually became really useful during the big dip in March, because people were swapping their, or they wanted to find a way to quickly, close their positions or swap their positions. And so yeah, actually, it sort of inspired me, I guess, to get more involved, because I was like, okay, this is like it's a brand new design space and tooling. There's so much tooling that isn't there, that just doesn't exist. And as the ecosystem grows or the industry grows, there's like more challenges or issues that could be solved on all layers, like in the sort of foundational level to more the user interface level, which is that simple things like swapping positions, or how do I close down a position without having to do like 4 transactions? Can I just do it in 1 transaction cheaply? And so yeah, actually, so the short answer is that it actually made me probably more interested. Of course, it was a bit stressful at the time, as you see your net worth dipping down. But I think there's a lot of opportunities out there.
Okay. So day-to-day at Aave, or let's start with Aave at your role. What is the most exciting thing that you're working on, or what you're excited about? What you go into work, what is it that gets you up in the mornings?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like we're a startup, pretty small team. I mean, we just grew the team a lot this year, but constantly, like every day, or let's say every few days, there's something like brand new, and week to week, we're generally, or at least in my role, I'm generally working on like new things all the time, or different things, and there's always like multiple things going on at the same time. So I think that's interesting and exciting, in that if I get bored or stuck on one area, I can just move to this other area and give my mind the rest, and then work on this other stuff. So that's really cool. Also, just being sort of at the forefront or on the bleeding edge of DeFi and crypto, that's sort of the best thing, because we sort of get a really good view on what's happening, and how people are using products, how people are using DeFi, and we really get to think about. I mean, we get to think, like what's coming up in this next 6 months or 12 months. Or what can we create, or what do we need to create? What sort of tooling? What sort of problems? New problems coming up as well.
Okay, awesome. And so right now, your focus is on the developer community. So people who are building integrations with Aave. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a roadmap or a vision for, or metrics or KPIs? How are you thinking about this? I'd love to know about your team structure, or like how you guys thinking about it, resource allocation, because I'm sure a lot of teams out there have the same kind of questions.
Yeah. I think the short answer is we're pretty chaotic, in that like everyone wears many hats on the developer team. Like everyone wears many hats, and most people are full stack, or can dive into GraphQL, or dive in front end, or whatever else. So with developer relations and integrations, the same thing. It's where sometimes I'll be working on helping someone with their Solidity contracts. Other times it'll be how to use Web3 or something is happening in their front end JavaScript. And so we don't have necessarily any, or at least I don't have any like KPIs, but it's more just like making it easier for developers, both community developers and integrators, just to use the product or use the protocol. So, we get a lot of feedback on the docs or what's missing in the docs, or if questions keep coming up, then I'm like, okay, probably should create a guide there, or, it's those sort of things. And as the ecosystem grows, as more people build on Aave and TVL grows and all those sort of things, I guess that's sort of the North Star, is that, if TVL is growing and more products and protocols are being built on top of Aave, and then that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Now, in your day-to-day, what is the stack that you use? Like, I'd love to know, like, for your development documentation, for your onboarding, are you exploring and kicking the tires with new tools? Love to know a little bit about your workflow there.
Yeah, sure. So developer stack is, like I said, it depends on what we're working on. But the standard, like, let's say TypeScript, Node, React, Solidity, we use Hard Hat now for a lot of the Solidity code. We've recently moved over to GitHub. We used to all work, we used to have an internal GitLab, but now we made it sort of public on GitHub. From the developer relations or community side, of course, there's Discord and Telegram, but we use Gitbook for the documentation. And the main reason for that is that Gitbook is just so easy to use. It's like a WYSIWYG editor, and anyone can log in, edit the pages, and change things really quickly. So I think one thing for us internally is that outside of the smart contracts and the protocol level, we're quite fast moving, and sometimes we can be like sometimes there might be a mistake on the docs, and anyone in the team can sort of just go in and fix it straight away. Or like someone says, hey, we should add this guide or add this, they can just do that. And of course, on the Solidity protocol level side, there's tons of auditing, and that's a much slower, longer process, as it should be. But on the other side, we still have, I guess, a bit of the hacker mentality in some areas, and I think that's how we can be so quick with certain things.
Very cool. Is there something about Aave which you feel that the community is misunderstood or not well understood from a technical perspective?
Because I get such a wide range of interactions with developers and integrators, it really depends. Like some, let's say, community developers are just starting Web3 or just learning Solidity. So there's a lot of missing pieces there. Whereas some integrators, let's say the institutional integrators, they're maybe in the blockchain space, but they don't know too much about Ethereum or the nuances of deploying contracts or gas limits and block limits and things like that. So it really depends. But if I had to choose one thing across the entire protocol, it would probably say the asset listing process. A lot of people sort of reach out to us or someone in the team and say, I want to list my token or whatever. But we're progressively decentralizing. So the whole asset listing process actually happens out in the open. So there's a governance forum, and there's a process that you post, and other community members will comment and vote and whatever else. So that's probably something that's a bit misunderstood, but slowly people are learning about that, I think.
Mm-hmm. From your day-to-day workflow, what is the role of data? What are the tools that you use to understand data, understand the metrics? Do you crunch data? Is it Excel mostly, or is it more specialized tools? I'd love to know a little bit about the data side of your role.
Yeah, sure. I probably don't do as much data stuff as let's say Alexander, who was on a previous call as well. But Like if I'm looking at data, I'd use something like a June Analytics dashboard. I'm not really the one that creates that. I think Alex like usually sends it to me. Of course, there's probably not that I don't use that much Excel. But for us, like, or for me as a dev, what we're normally using is like GraphQL, or we have like subgraphs, or just like the usual JSON APIs. So on my end or on the dev's end, we're more like creating that data or extracting that data, not necessarily presenting it or processing it. Let's say, like we're more just like taking. And normally we take it directly from the blockchain and then put it into a subgraph or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Now, if you think about what has happened in the space over the last year, even, right? So we've been building since 2017. Covalent is we've been building through the bear market, and now we have over 100 customers. All kinds of guys like 0x and Zapper and Zerion. They all use Covalent. The stack has dramatically improved. A year ago, I don't think there was hard hat. This is another tool I just came across called Tenderly, which does traces and does like Tenderly. Yeah. So I'm looking at these tools. This is like magic. This didn't exist a year ago. Even hard hat. Even there was actually, I think it was the Tenderly team that lets you fork the blockchain state and process a transaction. And then you can see what happens. So this is crucial for multi-sig kind of activity moving funds around. You want to see exactly what it's in. It's almost like a sandbox for you to try your state changing functions. I'd love to know something else that blew your mind recently, like the way Tenderly blew my mind, especially that forking the blockchain stuff. Is there something that comes to mind that's really exciting that you'd like to share?
That's really exciting. Firstly, I agree that Tenderly is such a great product. And that their simulation product is really awesome, super useful. Also, I think Hard Hat and Ganesh, they have like a fork mainnet for developers where you can do that sort of thing. That's really useful. I have to say, like, I've been playing around with like L2 things lately, and that's quite magical because I've been in Ethereum like for so long, and I'm just used to paying a certain amount, and it's going to cost a lot if the transaction goes through really quickly. But just seeing the minuscule cost on L2 and the speed, it's quite magical. So that was sort of just blew my mind.
Yeah, so fun little story there. We index Matic, which is now called Polygon. And when we initially indexed, so the way Covalent works is we copy out the entire blockchain data into a Postgres database, and then we create these APIs. So that's how we're different from something like the graph. And so when so our transaction API, for example, that's one best in class in the space, where you can pull out the transactions for a wallet, and it also joins it with the log events, fully decoded log events. So we do decoding on our side. So and so those gas prices, we also give it in US dollars because we have a lot of tax customers who require that. And when I looked at the gas price, I thought there was a mistake on our side. Like, usually you mess up the contract decimals. If you don't scale it properly, you have like really weird numbers. And I think it was like 1/100th of a cent for a transaction. It's like, this can't be right. I'm not used to this being so cheap. And I was shocked to see this is actually how cheap it was. And I'm really excited because it's not just Polygon, right? There's Optimism on the horizon. There's all these other kinds of sidechains like Starkware and Loopring and ZK Sync, more generalized sidechains, so you don't have to write these zero-knowledge circuits, especially for your application. Who else? All these layer one chains are also amazing. So we have indexed Binance Smart Chain, Avalanche, and then all of the Polkadot substrates that are EVM based, like Moonbeam and Akala and Clover and Edgeware. There's just so much going on in this space. It's so exciting because now as a developer, you're spoiled for choice, right? And what's magical here is that if you're targeting the EVM, you have so many blockchains that you can redeploy and just try it all out. In fact, there should be something. I know there's CI tools where it deploys across multiple versions of Python. So all the way from like 2.6, 2.7, 2.8, 3, 3.1, 3.2. So it's basically a matrix, and then it runs your test suite against each Python version. It's almost like you need to run that across all of these EVM implementations just to see how it performs. And I think that's just going to be a natural state of things, because if you do not deploy your sushi swap on Binance Smart Chain, someone else will just fork it and deploy it on BSC, right? So you should be the guys to like, the team should deploy it. So it's so exciting. I think there's so much going on there, and I think we're just at the start, right? I think like iteration 2 is when a lot of the magic happens, a lot of the understanding happens. Like, you build your first version and you go to market. Okay, great. And I'm sure it's the same for Aave. Like, let's get into that. Like, between version 1 and version 2, what is the biggest understanding or biggest, I would say, shift in your thinking? Because it's come pretty fast, right? V1 was last year. I know it was right before ETH Denver, because one of the protocols got hacked using Aave's flash loans. And then V2 came out this year. So that was pretty quick, just a year apart. So what is the biggest mental model that had to be adjusted after the launch of V1?
Yeah, I think just going back on what you were saying before is I agree. So the space is super exciting, and with these other blockchains and the ease of copy pasting open source projects, it creates new sort of game theoretic mechanisms where it's like, okay, like, now that if people can copy and paste it easily, what gives you the sort of how do you capture the value, or how do you ensure that your community or whatever isn't easily copy and pasted over? So that's a fascinating space as well, thinking space. But yeah, so with from V1 to V2, I mean, all credit goes to the core devs who actually did the Solidity contracts. They worked super hard on that, and they did it definitely in record time. One of the things with V1 was we had flash loans, and we it was because it was a brand new primitive, DeFi primitive, at least for us and for a lot of other people. We were quite protective we had many audits, but we were still quite protective within the protocol, like what would be the consequences, or what were the attack vectors that we couldn't see within the protocol. So it was quite strict in the way flash loans could be used. And then in V2, because there's been like a year of flash loans in the wild, and we're starting to understand it a lot more, understand the attack vectors and whatever else. Now flash loans can be used throughout the Aave protocol. So with that, that enables that for us to do things like collateral swap within the protocol, or debt swaps, or even potentially margin trading, or those sort of things within the Aave protocol. So the big learning from that is actually, yes. And so probably one of the when I was talking to Ernesto, who's one of the core devs, or one of the lead devs a while ago, is I think one of the approaches was to have some of the parts as generalized as possible, because some of the things we don't actually know how devs what they will create. So for example, like flash loans, or we have batch flash loans now, or debt incurring flash loans. So these sort of things, like, it's like, okay, well, what can we build with that? It's like, well, like, we don't know, like the Genesis team, we don't really know what we could build. But there's a lot of creative people out there, and they're going to create some cool stuff, just like what happened with flash loans. Not talking about the vulnerability attacks, but on the other side of like what DeFi Saver or Instadap and all those other guys, those sort of smart wallet tooling, they sort of create some amazing things. Yeah, so I guess one of the big learnings was from V1 to V2 was create sort of as general as possible. Yeah, and another example of that sort of philosophy is with credit delegation. So we integrated native credit delegation in V2. So that means that you can delegate your credit, your borrowing power, to someone else, and then also you can borrow on behalf of someone else. And there's really just like the design space in that is just huge. and I'm pretty sure we'll start to see a lot of brand new applications in the next few months that we've never thought of as well, because people are just starting to understand that now.
Awesome. Now, in terms of the stack, the full stack, you have the obviously the protocol team within Aave builds the protocol. How much emphasis do you put on the front end, or do you want to push that to the community to build community interfaces? Like, what kind of support, what kind of roadmap do you have on what you take on internally and what the community takes on?
Yeah, sure. So the Aave Genesis team, which is which I'm part of, of course we create the Aave front end, and that's more of I think of it more of let's say a reference implementation. So this is these are sort of all the features of the protocol that's meant to be for users, and this is sort of the branding, and this is what it should act and look like. But also part of my job in I guess integrations and developer relations is that we want as many people to create their own interfaces and to find their own business use cases by just leveraging the underlying Aave protocol. So as example, like I mentioned, like Instant App or DeFi Saver or Argent Wallet or all these other integrators where you don't even have to touch like Aave.com. You can go straight to like DeFiSaver.com and and you can manage your whole position, borrow, pay back, and all that stuff without even touching our front end. So that's definitely something we encourage, and we have a lot of code examples, and we really definitely we would love to see that. Yeah.
And so, what is the approach to hackathons? Do you guys have specific, for lack of better words, requests for projects where you're seeding the community with ideas? How is your approach to hackathons? Or you just say, "Oh, build something cool in Aave," and then let the community come up with ideas?
Yeah, it's a bit of both actually. So when we first started getting heavily involved in hackathons, it was a bit of that, just like build something cool. Here's the features and protocols. But after a while, I actually created like we have docs.aave.com/hack. There's actually is a request for projects section there, and we specifically made that when we released V2. And just because V2 had so many new features, and including Aavonomics, staking, governance, all those sort of things, so we wanted to get some developers and some of the community to start thinking like over here with these new features. Look, these are some potential things you could do. Yeah, so these days with hackathons we always have some ideas, requests for projects. Then also part of our sponsorship with various hackathons is that we'll assign prizes. So we might have the best use of Flashstone prize, best I don't know, cross protocol integration or something like that. So that's our approach to hackathons. And then also the other thing is just encourage helping people to learn about Aave as much as possible. We've had so many let's say companies and projects that started from hackathons, and then a few months later, a year later, they raise a seed round, and then they're a real company, and they're building out their own company, and Aave is a small part of their whole product suite, and that's what we want to encourage as well, to build sustainable businesses, not just hackathon projects.
Very cool. Yeah, we've seen that a lot as well with Covalent. Like companies are, we see them. They come up, they sign up with a gmail.com address, and then they're just hacking on some stuff. They ask some questions, and it's great. And you never hear from them for a couple of months, and then they come back to us and say, "Oh yeah, we're, can we, pay you guys to make sure your API is robust?" And it's like, yeah, well. Cool. Super happy to be a part of your success, but all the credit goes to the projects who came up with the initiative even before funding, right? So yeah, that's very cool to see. One more question I have is there an overlap with Aave and NFTs? Is there anything on the roadmap? Like, what are you guys thinking about it? Something you could share publicly? Would love to know if there's anything along the NFT space.
Nothing that I have no announcements or anything that I can share. I mean, a lot of people in the team are very like into NFTs, and you know, a lot of people. Jordan, like I think he buys a lot of NFTs, super active. Stani as well. Yeah, but at the moment we don't really have anything to share on that specific topic. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting, exciting stuff happening in the space.
Yeah, we're going to be sponsoring a hackathon with ETH Global called NFT Hacks. I think it's later in March, and I'm personally super excited. So for our community members, people who do all of these hackathons and part of our Alchemist Ambassador program, we give out NFTs, like custom branded NFTs. In fact, even for the Dungeons data with Aave, we're giving out custom Aave themed NFTs, which is like really cool, really cool. People really appreciate this. I really love this kind of stuff that's going on. I think it's bringing in part of the fun. So I don't have a financial background, so a lot of the financialization of all this stuff doesn't really excite me as much. Like credit delegation, I understand all the mechanics, but I'm not actually like thrilled to work on these things. The data, of course, data is like bread and butter for me. But the NFT stuff, I think, has brought back the fun in this whole space, which is awesome to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Also bringing a lot of creatives as well, a lot more creatives, and just getting a lot of new perspectives on things as well, which is really cool.
In fact, our design director joined because of our NFT focus. So he is a DJ in his spare time, and he publishes these records, and he's now putting them as NFTs and putting them in OpenSea. And then he's like, okay, how do I use Covalent? And then he's like, okay, I'm very interested in the space, and I want to actually join. And Covalent is an option there. So and I believe in the new ETH Global Hackathon. They actually have two streams, one for creatives and one for devs. So it's not a pure dev-focused hackathon, right? So you also have a stream for creatives, which is, I think, brilliant, because it's more welcoming, more inclusive, because you do need the creatives to actually do stuff. Like just the tech alone is not enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a fantastic idea. Okay, so we're coming up on our time here. Any final thoughts? Something you'd like to share? Maybe what is a trick to get more people in the space? I think that's a valuable question to ask. Like, how do we 2x, 3x, 5x, 10x the space in terms of people building? Like what involved?
True. Well, firstly, I don't think there's any trick to get people in the space. We don't really. Also, we don't. It sounds a bit bad to me. What's the trick? But I'd say to get people, I think people are it's like self-select. People self-select themselves into the space anyway. And I think as the industry moves forward, as people like ourselves, continue building and creating cool stuff and creating useful stuff, it will attract more people. So yeah, and continue being as welcoming as possible. I think that's one of the big things. I mean, I'm pretty heavy in the Ethereum space. So I've sort of dipped toes in other ecosystems as well, but I found that just one of the I guess cultural values of the Ethereum ecosystem is that, like, the friendliness and the not taking themselves too seriously. And I think that really helps, like, bring new people in the space, in that it's not so let's say elitist or like scary in a way. So I think that would be one thing. What do you think?
I think we should use more technology and more terms that the traditional world, the Web 2 world, works. And so that could be REST APIs, GraphQL, all of that stuff. And this is the worst example, and I'm just being frank here. Maybe it'll piss off some people, but if you look at makers contracts, they have their own 3-letter acronyms. I literally have a that lets me translate the words and the actions on the protocol, and that is the worst developer experience. Like, that's like one end of the spectrum, right? It's terrible, and we should not. I don't know why they did that. I don't know what the intention was at. So that is the opposite of what we should be doing, in my opinion, right? I don't know how far my opinion goes, but I think, that is, we should use more terms. We should have more connectivity with regular systems, less of the crypto stuff, to an extent, right? To an extent. I think people, at the end of the day, like the self-custody, not everyone is going to be ready for it, but people do have that option of self-custody, which is very important, which is not an option of the traditional financial products, right? So people need to understand and need to appreciate that. Yeah, but crypto is, at least on the developer side, it's improving. Tools like Hardhack, things like stepping through debuggers, IDEs. If IntelliJ adds Solidity mode, that'll just explode. You can see, there's a lot of interest. So, especially this bull market, we're going to have that next wave of builders coming in and then building through the next couple of years. So it's an exciting time. I think now is probably the wrong time to leave the space, in my opinion. Right?
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. And we're still a super early stage as well. Like there's people just discovering Bitcoin now. Like wait until they discover like smart contracts or DeFi.
Absolutely. All right, David, it was fantastic chatting with you. And let's keep in touch. We'll put this recording up on YouTube and then share it with our communities.
Sure. Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Take care. Bye.
All right. Catch you later. Bye.